Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen, an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa. I present these videos weekly for a couple different reasons. The first of which is just to allow you, the viewer who have stumbled across this video for whatever reason, to gain some different insight into the assigned gospel text for the week. That's kind of the first reason. And the other reason is as I try and take my brain out of the mode of prep and work, background work, pondering, praying, working with the text throughout the course of the week, into the mode of actually writing and preparing the sermon that I will preach to my congregation on Sunday. So that's kind of why I do these videos. It serves a couple of different purposes, and I enjoy it greatly. That being said, this coming Sunday, which is January 17th, 2016, the second Sunday after Epiphany, our assigned gospel text comes from John's Gospel. We are jumping out of the Gospel of Luke for this week. It comes from John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Now, a brief word about Epiphany and why this particular passage is fitting. Now, Epiphany, I've mentioned before in some other videos, is the season when we celebrate Jesus being revealed to the world. It starts off, the season of Epiphany starts with the Day of Epiphany, which is the same day every year, January 7th, I think. I feel like I should know that. Might be the 6th. Yeah, 6th, excuse me, January 6th. Is the Day of Epiphany, and that the gospel for that day is always from Matthew, when the three magi, or the magi, arrive and encounter Herod and encounter Jesus. That's the Day of Epiphany. And then the season of Epiphany lasts from that day until the beginning of Lent at Ash Wednesday. This year, quite short, just due to the early nature of Lent and Easter. But that's kind of determines what goes on. Now, as the season continues, we hear different stories, different gospel passages of Jesus continually being revealed to the world. For instance, his baptism is always featured on the first Sunday of Epiphany, when God's voice, God the Father's voice, reveals, "This is my Son, the beloved, with him I am well pleased." And things of that nature continue to happen. Now, this week, it's the story of Jesus turning water into wine, which in John's gospel is the first of his miracles. So John calls them signs, signs that reveal the glory of God. And it's interesting as we think about this, these signs, that's a very common theme within John's gospel, not only the signs that Jesus does perform so that people may believe in him, but also the notion of his detractors oftentimes asking for a sign. What is the sign what is the sign of your authority to do these things? We hear that after the cleansing of the temple that takes place very shortly after this. And John's gospel happens very early, whereas the other gospels place it later on, towards the end of his life. But that's kind of definitely an ongoing theme as the divinity of Christ is, and the glory of God within Jesus is continued to be revealed to the world. So having this here during Epiphany definitely makes sense. Now, what's interesting about this, this almost seems to kick off Jesus' ministry. He hasn't really been active much. All we've heard up to this point has been about his baptism and the testimony of John the Baptist, and then the calling of the first disciples. That's kind of what goes on in chapter 1. So now we pick up here in chapter 2, and we see this whole deal going on. On the third day, and that's the third day after the calling of those first disciples, kind of perhaps third day foreshadows Easter, and when after 3 days the resurrected Lord is revealed to the world, kind of a similar pattern there. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Cana is a small town very near to Nazareth, which is where Jesus grew up. Galilee itself is a fairly small region, not overly large, and so it's certainly possible that they would have traveled around and known some people here. So there's this wedding going on, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. Okay, so weddings at the time were a lengthy affair. It was a 7-day celebration when a couple was married. Now, for Mary to be there and for Jesus to be invited as well, likely they know know the couple or know the family that's being married. Perhaps they're relatives. That's certainly possible in a small region like this, and with the towns only being a few miles apart. That's definitely a possibility. May kind of help explain some of the action that we see later on with Mary really stepping into the role of trying to solve the problem that arises. But we don't exactly know what the connection is. All we know is that there's this wedding going on, and it's been going on for a little while, and Jesus has arrived now along with his disciples, and Mary is there. And interestingly enough, Mary is always called the mother of Jesus here in John's gospel. She doesn't get named, most unfortunately, but Mary is who she is. We know that from the other gospels. So they are all there. So that's kind of the setting of what's going on. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." Pause there for a second again. Now, as I mentioned, weddings were a lengthy affair. They lasted for a week, and guests would kind of come and go. Some people would be there the entire time. Some would be there for a day or for a couple of days. But people would come and go throughout the course of the celebration. But it was the duty of the hosts to provide for the needs of their guests while they are there. And one of the biggies is the wine of celebration. And it's expected that that wine is there for people throughout the course of the celebration. And lo and behold, they run out of wine. Big social faux pas here that will look very negatively upon the hosts. Now, there's a lot of debate as to who the hosts are. Is it the parents from the couple, likely the groom's parents, or is it the couple themselves who have been married? Who's the host? We don't exactly know, but either way, this is socially unacceptable. That they would not provide enough wine or not have enough wine for their guests who have come. So that's what's going on. And as we see, Mary kind of seems to take charge of solving the issue. We don't know why. Again, perhaps they're relatives. Perhaps she was asked by the hosts to help out with the situation. Perhaps her past history with Jesus leads her to know that he may be capable of doing something here. We don't know. We don't know what her motivation is, only that she takes charge and she pushes Jesus into the beginning of his ministry here. Maybe mom just needed to give him a little boot to get going. We don't know. But Jesus' reaction to her seems almost rude. Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come. Now, when I hear the word woman, and he's addressing her that way, that seems very negative, almost derogatory, but that's just the way I hear it. Not everyone thinks it may be the same later on at the cross when Jesus is hanging on the cross, and he basically takes Mary and John and puts them together, and he calls her woman. Woman, behold your son, and man, behold your mother. That's spoken or thought to be very loving, very compassionate. So Jesus calling her woman is not necessarily a negative thing, but still, he's kind of like, what concern is that to you and me? It almost sounds like he's breaking the commandment of honor your father and mother. But he does listen to her in the long run. What's interesting to note, though, not so much the woman, what concern is that of you and me, but it's my hour has not yet come. This is a ongoing theme throughout John. We see it in some of the other gospels as well, but throughout John it really is. My hour has not yet come. His hour has not yet come. His hour has not yet come. Well, his hour for what? And when we asked that question, did a little bit of legwork, and when Jesus finally says the hour has come, it's at the Last Supper. It's just before they go out to the garden where he is betrayed, which of course leads to his passion and his death. The hour of God to be glorified happens when Jesus dies on the cross. That is where God's glory is revealed. And why? Well, because God is showing us his immense power, his immense love. His glory is found when he overcomes that which separates us from him, when he overcomes death by dying. That when God shows that there is no length he will not go to in order to be with us and to love us and to create life abundantly within us. So that's when the hour will come. Not until Jesus' ministry is over and he's about to die. Okay, so His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. So she's like, he may be dragging his feet, but he could do something. So whatever he says, just do it. Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. These would have been water for basically ceremoniously, that's a weird word, for washing your hands before you eat. It's Jewish ritual. It's important. That's why the water jars are there. Jesus said to them, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, now draw some out, take it to the chief steward. So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now. Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Okay, so that's the rest of the story there. So basically, Jesus is like, why he chooses the water jars for purification. There's speculation that he's doing this to show us that it is Jesus that purifies, and that we find, if it's sacramental, through the wine, through Holy Communion, this is given for you for the forgiveness of sins. That whole purification thing. I can see a connection there. I think it's kind of a long stretch, but that just doesn't speak to me. Perhaps it does to you. But regardless, he takes these water jars and fills them up, or has them fill them up, and they hold 20 or 30 gallons. This is an enormous amount. Depending on the measurements, and we don't exactly know, but depending on the measurements, it's estimated that this would have been the equivalent of anywhere from 600 to almost 1,000 bottles of wine. A humongous amount, far more than would now be required for this wedding feast to come to completion. We see the whole steward interacting with the bridegroom. Very likely that points us that the host is the groom himself. Though again, we don't exactly know. But so this young couple is who has now gotten married. They receive the abundance. And not just more than we need, but abundantly more than we need. And they receive that. It provides for the guests, and of course they likely keep the excess, and we'll have that as well. Now, this is interesting that not only has Jesus performed this miracle, but it's a foreshadowing to the feeding of the 5,000, which is another miraculous happening when God provides, or when Jesus provides in abundance, that the food is given, the small amount of food is given, and everyone is fed to their fill, and they pick up 12 baskets of leftovers, which likely, we don't know, but likely that leftovers goes back to the boy who shared his lunch in the first place. And this abundance over and above, far beyond what we need, far beyond what we expect, is what God provides. There's always the notion of, I get kind of a charge out of it, that the steward is like, well, usually by this point we're serving a really crappy wine because everybody's drunk and they can't really tell, but you have saved the best wine for last. It'd be like, imagine by this point you're expecting Arbor Mist and you get a bottle of Cristal, which is like the cheapest to the most expensive wine, although that's champagne, but wine that you can think of. $1.50 a bottle, up to I think it's like $15,000 a bottle, or $25,000 a bottle, something like that. It's really expensive, but that's the notion that not only does God provide for us far more than we need, but in far greater quality than we could ever expect or hope for. Now, the notion that this is pointing towards God's grace, and they call it grace upon grace, that God sees the needs that we have and meets them far beyond what we could expect, far beyond what we could hope for, far beyond what we need. God's grace is perfection for us, and it is a free gift, and it overcomes our issues, our failures, our stigmas. Within this story, they fell short on wine. They couldn't provide for their guests, and that would have stained their reputation. Jesus overcomes that as a free gift to them, and it's abundantly more than they need and require. God overcomes that which separates us from him, and doesn't do it just enough, but does it abundantly. God's love for us is all encompassing. It's perfection beyond what we can comprehend. That's what I think that this passage, what this story really points to. And it's interesting then at the end we get the little details again. It happened in Cana, and it revealed his glory. Even though the hour of God's glory has not happened, his glory is revealed because his ability, his power, his divinity is revealed in the fact that he could do this miraculous thing. And then we hear that his disciples believed in him. That's an important theme again here within John's gospel. Belief in Jesus. That's faith. And sin, on the counterpoint here in John, is not believing that Jesus is God. But throughout the course of this gospel, we continue here. People believed in him. People believed in him, oftentimes because of his signs, sometimes because of his teaching. But we hear right at the end of John's gospel, it's an important point, that these things were written down. These signs were written down so that you, the reader, may come to believe that Jesus is Lord, and through belief in him have life eternal. That's what this gospel is about, is believing that Jesus is who he says he is, and that he is accomplishing that which he says that he's coming to do, and is fulfilling that grace, that gift that's offered through the love of God for each one of us. That's what this whole thing is pointed at. Now, this first sign, we hear his disciples believed. As he does more signs, other people believe. And all of these are recorded so that we might too believe. So that's what's happening here in this important passage, as Jesus' divinity, his ability, his divine nature is revealed for the first time here in John's gospel, and that's why we have it here during Epiphany. If you have thoughts, questions, comments based on this passage, please share those down in the comment section, and we can continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, have a great week, and God bless.